Thank you, and enjoy the performance.
Hello and welcome. I'm Giulio Ongaro, Dean of the College of the Performing Arts at Chapman University. Tonight's event is part of At the Musco, a series of online events where you can connect in real time with Chapman faculty and students, professional artists, and one another, all engaged in what we call the art of community. The College of Performing Arts produces well over 100 events a year, and many of the most important events take place at the Musco Center. Dance performances, orchestra and choral concerts, musicals, and operas, to name a few. I also produce the annual gala Chapman Celebrates, which showcases about 150 of our students with the help of Matt McCray, whom you will meet in a moment. As part of the season, I and others in my college are constantly engaged with professional guest designers for the set, costumes, lighting, stage direction, sound design, and so on. And the process of working with them is absolutely fascinating. I hope today's event will give you a glimpse of the challenges of putting together these productions and of the true delights of working with such talented professionals. And now, here's your host, Musco Center's Napoleon Gladney.
Thank you so much, Julio. Good evening and welcome to CoPA Designs for the Musco Stage in partnership with Chapman University's College of Performing Arts. If this is your first time joining us for an At the Musco online event, welcome. Please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe to Musco Center's channel on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also join our email list for updates on new happenings and online events just like this one at muscocenter.org. We have received some brilliant questions from our viewers that will be included in tonight's conversation. Please ask your production and design related questions in the chat, and we will try to get them answered at the end of the conversation live tonight. We are so honored to be joined by our moderator, Matt McCray. Matt is a highly regarded Southern California director, producer, performer, and video designer. Matt will be joined by 3 theatrical designers, some of whom he has worked closely with on past CoPA performances at Musco Center. I'll be returning to ask you questions and get them answered tonight with the cohort in a little bit. And with that, I pass the mic to Matt.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Matt McCray. I'm a freelance director, and I'm excited to be joined by 3 amazing designers who we're going to learn about their process, their work, what is design, what is the difference between these 3 design areas, and what makes a good collaboration. Often when we see productions and stage productions, we don't really think about what went into it. We just enjoy it. And so today we actually get to peek behind the curtain and see what went into all that work that made it look and sound the way that it did. I've directed the last 3 years of Chapman Celebrates at Musco Center, and I'm excited to have this discussion with these 3 amazing designers. Kristin Campbell, who's a scenic designer. Kristin, can you just give us a wave? So that's Kristin Campbell. And Carin Jacobs, our costume designer. Great. And Cricket Myers, our sound designer, who's with us tonight. So these 3 very different design areas, and we're going to talk about each of them one at a time, and then eventually we'll come back and we'll all talk together about how they interact. So that's the agenda for today. As Napoleon mentioned, I've worked with Carin and Kristin a number of times. Carin and Cricket a number of times, but I have not worked with Kristin. They're the K women. It's like, as we were typing this out, it was like K, but Carin is with a C. Well, let's get started. I think we should probably just dive right in. There's a lot to talk about, and at the end, like I said, we'll come back as a group. So Kristin, we're going to start with you actually. I'm just going to do a little quick bio on you before we get started. So you are a professional scenic and projection designer, actually. in the Orange County and LA areas. And you've done productions here at Chapman, as well as with Go Button Productions. You're an assistant professor at Chapman and the founding member and managing director of the Wayward Artists, which is a theater company in Santa Ana. You're also the vice president of the Orange County Theater Guild. So Kristin has a lot of great things to share. And with that, I think we've met you. We've now discussed. We met on here on Zoom, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your work, your process. Tell us about what scenic design is. It could, what's the timeline? What are the hours like? What is the costs? How do you generate ideas? Like, just let us peek behind the curtain a little bit with you. So I'll take it away.
Yeah, so I've only designed for the Musco once, and that was this spring, about, was that 3 or 4 months ago. We did sneak in before everything kind of had to close down because of COVID. So we'll look at that today. In terms of my process, I start the same way I think every designer starts, which is that I read the script multiple times. And for me, that's at least 3 times, maybe 4 times. That's before I even meet with the director or the other collaborators, because I really want to get to know the show personally and relate to things. But I'm also looking for like theme and style and mood and some practical concerns, right? There's a big difference between 50-person musical and a 2-person drama. So I really want to get to know that before I meet with other people. But then once I do, that's when I think the real fun begins. And that's finding out from the director what we're going to do with it, or having a conversation about what we're going to do with it, wherever that's going to go and wherever my director is with their process, and then meet the other designers and just talk. And if I'm lucky, I'll have a few weeks to start talking about the process with everybody. But sometimes that doesn't happen because we get hired a little later in the process. But with all hopes that we can just sit with some coffee or some tea and just work it out, and talk about it in a very creative way. That's always the joy and the hope, but it doesn't always happen. So as a scenic designer, it's really important for me to start building a visual vocabulary. That's what I call it, which just translates to me doing a lot of research. So right now, what you're looking at is some of the research for 9 to 5, the 1980 film, the musical based off the 1980 film with our favorites, Dolly Parton, Jane Fonda, and Lily Tomlin. Yay. And I had to do just a lot of research in terms of like what an office space looks like in the late 1970s, early 1980s. So that's what we're looking here. In terms of my personal process, I don't know if everyone does this, but I use Pinterest a lot. It's sort of funny, when I started my career, it was all art libraries all the time. And now there's just such great images out online. I can't just, I just embraced it somewhere in there. And it's a really great tool because I can share it with all of my collaborators. They can look at my board, they can put comments on it. And it's kind of a fun way to go through images really quickly and sort of zone in on a look. So I think we can go to the next slide on this one. 9 to 5 is just one of those shows that has over 20 like scenes and locations. And it was really important for me to start early with storyboarding. So I sometimes with smaller shows, I'll start with little sketches and renderings. With this one, because it was such a complex, big beast, it was really important to do these kind of vector-based computer renderings really quickly so that we could get through it faster. And so this,
can you unpack, what does that mean, the vector-based? Like, can you explain that a little bit about that?
Thank you for keeping me honest. Yeah. So vector-based is just, it's when you make a file type that can get bigger or smaller very quickly. It's a digital term, as opposed to like, think about when you take a selfie photo with your cell phone and then you try and blow it up for to print on an 8x10 rendering, or like on an 8x10 photo for your wall, and it always looks kind of blurry and a little pixelated. That's not a vector-based image. So usually when I'm doing hand-drawn sketches, they're hard to blow up and they're hard to kind of manipulate and keep clean. And so these, you can kind of see this is more vector-based. And it's just a very clean way of doing things. And it allowed me to go quicker. So it's really just an example of how technology can help a process move smoother or quicker, which is kind of always what, at least from my perspective, a scenic designer is always trying to do. So this look is for the office space. So you see the desks there. We'll jump to the next slide pretty soon. I think, yeah, let's go for it. No, that's good. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm driving our poor tech person crazy tonight. Thank you. So you see these giant portals, and then that clock up there is a projection screen. We relied really heavily on that in the design. So the desks create that world, that office space that the actors can work with that are very realistic. But then we had these beautiful kind of conceptual architectural pieces that allowed us to change from one location to the next. And they're my favorite part of the design, those portals. And ports, just for anyone, I'm trying to watch my vocabulary. Portals are literally, it's portaling the space in. So it's a piece of scenery that allows us to kind of zoom in a little bit. And my inspiration for those were fluorescent lighting from the offices, because a lot of the themes in this show is about the struggles and the challenges of working in the office, particularly for women in that time. And for me, I hate fluorescent lighting. This is such a personal attachment. I hate fluorescent lighting. I'm like always trying to find bulbs that are warmer for my house. Like I want sunlight. The idea of being stuck in a space where those things are just beaming down on you and they hurt your eyes is just torturous. So it was very cathartic for me to design these scenery bits that embraced that, and then we're able to use it in a fun way. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. This is another storyboard image. This one is for the boss's office. And it was definitely the largest set we had in terms of, I mean, we had to bring on this bookcase. There was very practical considerations, right? We had to bring on the bookcase. There had to be a door. His desk needed to be big. It was kind of a lounge office, so we needed stuff. And that's just a lot of stuff, right? If you create a shopping list, that's a really complex chili, right? There's a lot of ingredients to that location. And it was also the set that came on and off the most. So that's why you're looking at these two storyboards tonight, is because they were coming on and off the most. But then there were a lot more. So let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. And here we can see the space has been transformed through lighting. So this is the moment where I really shout out to our lighting designer, Colby Norberg, because he did a lot of heavy lifting. On one hand, it looks like we've completely gone to a different location, because we have, but we really simplified it down in terms of the physical amount of scenery. And I think later tonight, we're going to talk about budget restraints. So that was some of it. But the bigger issue was just making sure it all fit on the stage. And this show was sort of interesting because these actors and our crew, which were all students, were working their little tushies backstage and working so hard. They were really great troopers, bringing on the set on and off, on and off. So it was really nice that we could figure out a way to tell the story where we sort of allowed the space to have negative space or not physical bits. We're using that back wall. We're using the projection screen. We're using the portals as a way to fill out the space. So it looks full and realized, but actually not having that many bits come on and off, even though this one's big. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Do you have any questions, Matt?
No, that's great.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. Okay. We also had a lot of fun with it. Just like I was saying about the portals, I brought in the fluorescent lights because it's just, that feels like an emotional thing for me, like being stuck with these fluorescent lights all the time. The idea of the filing cabinets that never seemed to end was something I was also resonating with. I had an administrative job when I was younger, doing a lot of data entry stuff, and I swear those file cabinets of always putting things in and off and like organizing, and then someone inevitably puts something in the wrong file.
Looks like you use kind of a forced perspective on your filing cabinets to give them a different sense of scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did that in a couple of places. We just allowed ourselves to be fun with it because that's what this show is. It's just there's high energy, and these the protagonists, the female characters, are just so just their antics are so funny and so relatable in a lot of very serious ways. But just to have fun with the visuals a little bit was interesting. And I have to say that, so that's a Xerox machine in this one, and I had to do so much research on what a Xerox machine looked like in the 70s because I had no idea. I wasn't born yet, so there was a weird amount of research, and I don't think that that was actually as big as they were back then. So we couldn't quite get there, but that was a custom build. And this was an example of trying to come up with an interesting way to bring things on and off. So there's actually 2 crew members inside that, and they're like kind of Flintstone mobiling it on and off. So it almost feels like it's magically coming on and off in a way that's very manual.
Hey, and the audience would never know, right? It's like making it work, and you have a crew member willing to do it. Great. Are there any other slides, or?
Yeah, we have a couple more. We'll run through them really quick, just so you get an idea of how much heavy lifting those portals were doing, how we're bringing scenery on and off. This is a moment where we have 3 different spaces happening simultaneously in kind of that fantastical musical theater way. And we can go to the next one. This one I had to include because it's my favorite. If you haven't watched 9 to 5 yet, you should watch the movie at least, now that we're in maybe have some time in our houses. The 3 women have these fantasies of killing their boss. I'm gonna just be honest about that, but it's in a humorous way, I promise you. And one of them is very like film noir. And the costume designer, Rachel Lorenzetti, just nailed it with the costume for this character because it has a sequence inside it. And then the red with the portals and the Judy's joint, it just all kind of came together in this beautiful way that really did, for me, transport us to a different location. And then we can go to the next slide.
Another thing, the clock has now changed many times, and so you use that surface to sort of help identify different locations as well.
Yeah, I wasn't the projections designer on this one. That was our lighting designer, Colby Norberg. But it was something we talked about a lot, that idea of the clock. And even though these are like fantasy moments, so the one before was Judy's joint, this one is I don't remember the name of the song, but the kind of the Western cowgirl fantasy. And that's still the shape of a clock, but it's feeling that motif now and satisfying that aesthetic. And then yeah, it's just it was so fun. Okay, and we'll go to the next one. I don't know if we have another one actually. Oh, no, we don't. And then that's it.
Wonderful. Really, really, really cool. It's so interesting to hear a little bit about your process and the ways that you broke up space and the use of perspective, and then also the way that technology and the evolution of computers and computer science and programs have sort of changed your job for the better, so that you can do more with Pinterest or whatever it is. These online tools are so useful now.
Yeah, it's always amazing to me how much technology I have in my room. Like, I've invested in a 3D printer. I just bought a Cricut because I think it's going to help me make models quicker. There's just so many little tools and tricks that you can invest in that just make your job more efficient, so that you can spend more time on the creative art end and less on that very practical communication end. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is a great place to segue into Carin, who is our costume designer representative today. So Carin and I have worked together a couple times. She's designed over 100 shows for professional and educational theater, as well as for film and professional cheerleading, which I did not know, Carin, which is really interesting.
Arizona Cardinals.
All right, there we go, boom. She teaches costume history and design at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising and at Cal State University Dominguez Hills. And Carin has designed the last 2 years of costumes for Chapman Celebrates, which Dean Ongaro, who introduced this program earlier, mentioned as being this massive fundraiser for student scholarships at Chapman, and features a lot of College of Performing Arts students. So without further ado, Carin, I'll just pass it over to you.
Great. All right. Well, a little bit about my process. I think designers kind of all go through that same initial process of reading the script, right? That's where we start. That's our starting point. But my process is a little different because different than Kristin, my design process involves human bodies. So I need actors, I need dancers, I need bodies, to sort of inspire my design. So once I read the script, and a show like this is more individual numbers, right? So there is a script, but it's going from one musical number to another, and there's usually an overarching theme. So the way that you and I, Matt, collaborate on that is that we get together and we go through the numbers, right? Each musical number. And we collaborate and talk and brainstorm about the whole theme of the show. So this last year was the Year of the Woman, right? And then all of the musical numbers that you have chosen, we sort of get down into the nitty gritty about what is the song about? Who's the artist that is singing the song? Are we going with the original version? Are we going with a different version? And what exactly is the kind of color palette and energy and feeling that we want to get from this number, right? So that's kind of how I design for the gala at Chapman. And I'll just kind of take you through a bunch of really fun slides here. So
Great.
This first one is Respect, Aretha Franklin, obviously. And so the way that I start thinking about how I want to represent this and her and the colors and the number and the temperature of the number is really listening to the music. So I sit down with each piece of music and just listen to it over and over. I close my eyes, and it might sound corny, but I see colors when I close my eyes. I'm sure all of us visual people do, right? And then I go back and I watch old Aretha Franklin videos on YouTube. And I look at album covers, and I just kind of go down the rabbit hole and envelop myself in Aretha Franklin and Respect and all the different versions of it. And then I kind of marry that with whatever you and I have talked about, which you said you wanted this to be big and bright and fun and kind of a big 60s anthem and the power of women. And so I took the research of Aretha Franklin, which you see on the far left there. And I found that dress, which I absolutely loved. It had these big feathery sleeves. And then I found another dress that was very typical 1960s. I kind of called it the Supremes dress, which was like a sheath dress that had a sheer poncho with a bunch of boa feathers all around the edge. And I thought, how amazing would that be to have that repeated in triplicate on our 3 Arethas in the back. So I'm not sure if you guys can see it very well. My screen shows little teeny tiny pictures of the costumes, but I think what you guys are seeing is probably a little bit bigger. So you can probably see the 3 orange dresses in the back with the shawl, with the ponchos and the feather boas. And it just gave us that flavor, that sort of opulence and the color and the kind of temperature that we wanted for Aretha and her Respect song. And
Wonderful.
then the other image down below was actually a picture I found of Hairspray, the musical Hairspray on Broadway. And it was in the right time period. And it really had a lot of those super bright 60s colors that we were going for. So those were the images that I found that I was using for my inspiration. And then if you look at that top picture, that's our actual show. So I think we kind of replicated those colors and that feeling pretty well.
Great.
Next slide. All right. So this is another thing that has to happen when you are recreating a song from a real person. This is Patsy Cline, Crazy. And some of these women that we represented in our show were icons, right? So these are women that everybody knows who they are, what they look like, and we cannot design something to go off into left field and have it be unrecognizable, right? So there are times as a costume designer when you really just have to do your historical research and replicate a costume exactly the way that it was. And then there are other times, obviously, where you can be inspired by color and style and shape, and of course the movement, which we'll get to in a minute with some of the dance numbers. So this was a very iconic Patsy Cline costume. I actually did many years ago, the national tour of Always Patsy Cline, that's what it's called. And it had Sally Struthers. Sally Struthers was in it. And I actually had created this costume for that show many years ago. This isn't the same costume, but I was very familiar with the costume since I had done the show before. Okay, next slide. All right, conga. So this was the Gloria Estefan number. And remind me the name of the musical that it came from, Matt? On Your Feet?
On Your Feet. Yeah, I think it's On Your Feet.
On Your Feet. Okay. So they did the musical On Your Feet with about the story of Gloria Estefan and her husband. And that musical, I watched it over and over on YouTube. I listened to the music, and it just had this delicious, sugary Latin flavor to it, right? Miami and all the tropical islands in the Caribbean. And so we really wanted to try to recreate those colors. But not only that, but this musical is plopped right down into the middle of the 1980s. So kind of like what Kristin was saying, you have to look at multiple things at one time, right? You have to look at the Miami look, but you also have to go back and look at what they were wearing in the 80s. So this was super fun. Leopard print, hot pink, ruffles, very kind of, I call it like the 80s cheesy Oscar de la Renta look, right? And then we had musicians on stage too. So we put them in the guayabera shirts, the really bright colored kind of Cuban looking shirts. And they were all there with their kind of Panama hats playing the drums. Next. All right, Fever. This was one of the favorites, I think, right?
Yeah, it's great.
And this was, remind me of the name of the artist. I'm blanking on.
Oh my gosh.
Fever. I know. Are we horrible? Anyway, it's that song, You Give Me Fever, that everybody knows, right? And so we have the woman that is kind of the torch song singer, right, in the jazz club in Paris. And we sort of imagined, Audrey Hepburn from Roman Holiday coming in with her, all black skinny pants and her turtleneck and her beret. And it was very beatnik, and it was very kind of 1950s Paris. And this is a really good example of how collaborating with the lighting designer and the set designer works really well. This is kind of a success story where we all get together and talk about the look. And it was a very smoky, dimly lit cafe, kind of dripping with sax and, sultriness, if that's a word. And I think we achieved it. If you look at her dress a little bit more closely, it's this sort of like satiny Jessica Rabbit, kind of dark blood red, beautiful dress. And then all the patrons came in and did their kind of beatnik dancing. It was really fun.
And this show particularly, because it's not like a normal musical or play which has one world. This show, Chapman Celebrates, you're creating like about 14 different worlds that all have their own rules for your costume design of that world. So this is a very unusual, that's why the presentation of this one show has so many different styles to it.
Right, thank you for bringing that up. Each number was in a different time and place with different bodies and different dances and different music, different location, different lighting, different sound, different set, everything. So it was like we did 14 little mini plays, right? Mini musicals, yeah. Okay, next. True Colors. All right, so this was a fun one where we really wanted to, this was the Cyndi Lauper True Colors. And the idea was to have all of these actors come out in these different solid color palettes. And then at the very end, they all come together for like a rainbow flag. And then our fun little idea that Matt and I had with this was that they would all have a light up accessory, so that at the very end the lights went kind of dim and all of those pieces lit up, and it was very magical. Actually, it was kind of cool.
It was
we had suspenders and hats and glasses and all kinds of things, and it was sort of this living rainbow flag, which was great. Next. Okay, I Will Survive. This was so much fun. So of course it's disco, it's 70s. We dive into that sort of delicious discotheque of the 70s with the colors. And, you know, lighting was so important here. So this is another really great example of how to collaborate with another designer. So if you can see on the left, I have all of my research. And on the left, on the bottom, those two women who are in sort of the red and white, you know, those typical Saturday Night Fever disco dresses, those lights that are just shining and creating all of that atmosphere, right? Were so prevalent. And then in the you know, the disco sign with all those different colors. So the lighting designer and I, with the help of Matt, who's sort of our puppeteer, right? Really got on board together with this. And if you saw this in person, so the picture on the right is all of the dancers in their sequiny costumes with the bright colors. But what really made this number pop was all those disco balls. If you can see, there's like, I don't know, there was like 7 or 8 disco balls, right? Yeah. And when they shone the light on there, it just made that whole stage just kind of glitter and added to the whole ambiance. That's a really important thing with collaborating. I mean, we're not individual artists, right? Theater is a collaborative art. We can't do it alone.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to have, and you know, you'll get to cricket in a second. Sound is everything. Everything. If you can't hear, you know, what they're saying, if you can't hear the music, if you can't hear, you know, the taps, if you want to hear the taps or you don't want to hear the tap, you know, it's like it's all comes together in one big beautiful cake that we're all kind of baking together, right?
Now we've got about 5 or 6 more worlds to get through. As we're going, if there's anything, just to kind of almost give us like the quick straight through version.
Let's go.
Anything we need to notice about each of these?
Let's go. Let's pass this one. And let me get to a real favorite at the end. One more slide, please. Oh, well, this one was fun. This was Fight Song. And on the edges, you can see my inspiration, which was sort of edgy punk rock girls on trampolines with guitars. And then in the middle is what the world we created with that, which I think came off pretty well. And let's go one more. I'm trying to get to, that's our Lady Gaga. On the left is inspiration, and on the right is what we created. Again, there's those disco balls. And then one more slide. These are the historical narrators, and this is more like what we did with Patsy Cline. So we really went in and did research on each of the actual women and tried to recreate them as much as possible. But I'm going to try to skip to the tap slide that I think is at the very end. Let's keep going.
The end is born this, or as violins, maybe?
Oh, is it? There's Footloose. We're going back to 2018. But I think there's a one with the tuxedos and Fred and Ginger.
Oh yeah,
There we go. Yeah. So this was my favorite number in 2018. This was Top Hat and Tails. I think that was the name of the number. And so this was so much fun. We recreated Fred and Ginger, as you can see in the black and white picture on the left. And then it was a tap number. So we had the traditional Top Hat and Tails. But the fun thing that we did is all of the tappers were women. So we put them in shorts instead of long pants, little tuxedo shorts. And as you can see in the pictures on the right, it just was a showstopper. And again, with sound was so important. Good segue to cricket. Sound was so important here because I think we had like 40 people tap dancing on stage all at once.
Yeah.
So it has to be a magical mix of costume, light, dancing. Don't forget the dancers. They're doing all the work, right? And then, you know, the sound and not having the music or the tap, you know, overshine each other. So another example of collaboration. This is one of my favorite places to work and my favorite shows to do with collaborating with other professionals.
Wonderful. Yeah. And the designs are just, it's so fun on the costume front because you can go so many different places because the rules are just, you can blow it out with each different number. You don't have, because it's cohesive in other ways rather than worrying about color palette or whatever.
Right. Well, thanks to you having a good director who kind of lets me go a little crazy.
Yeah. Oh, I love good designers that are willing to go out there, and then we can always like pull it back, but let's go out there and have fun.
Yeah. Dreams are free, right?
We'll probably need to segue into cricket, but I just wanted to mention that this particular show, as you can see in the photos, has 100+ students in it. And so with what Chapman Celebrates has 300 costumes. I don't know how many total it had.
Over 300 costumes on over 100 bodies. Yeah.
So it's another thing that's very different about costume design, where you have so many steps for each individual costume because it's individuated for that actor, as opposed to kind of creating one process. You have to kind of keep 300 little processes going and tracking all of those. So
and don't forget about movement. We have to keep in mind what movement they're doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can't design something that's not going to move with their high kicks and their leaps and their tapping and all that stuff too.
Right.
There's a lot of layers.
A lot of steps. All right. Well, thank you, Carin. We'll come back after Cricket. We are going to meet our final designer. Here she is, Cricket, in the corner there. Cricket Myers, who I have worked with now for 14 years. I don't know, Cricket, if you did that, but I was like, oh my God, 14 years. So Cricket has been designing in LA for a number of years. She's done 300 productions at the Taper, the Geffen, Celebration Theater, all the way down to small little theaters like my own. She is the winner of a Drama Desk Award and a Tony nomination for Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo. And she won in 2015 won the LADCC Kinetic Award for Outstanding Achievement in Theatrical Design. And Cricket has designed the last 3 years of Chapman Celebrates at the Musco. And back in 2006, we did an experimental adaptation of Iphigenia. So she runs all the way from plays all the way to concerts to whatever. So I'll pass it off to you, Cricket. Take it away.
Great. So, the thing about sound is we don't have a lot of cool pictures to show. So a lot of my pictures are like here in paperwork. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how the 3 years have changed. So, as far as my process, a lot like Carin, I start with bodies, with people, but in this case, it's less about what they look like and how many of them are singing and what number are they singing, how many times do they sing, and kind of what their parts are. Each year, Matt has made this amazing document spreadsheet that lays out every actor and what characters they play and what songs they're in and when they're just dancing and when they're singing and when they're off stage singing. So I use that to kind of figure out how much gear I have to bring into the space to make sure that everybody is heard. The amazing thing about working at the Muso is, on top of being, physically beautiful when you walk in, the Muso has a gorgeous sound system that's already installed with an enormous amount of equipment that just makes my life that much easier. I'm not fighting against a bad sound system. There's beautiful Meyer line arrays. They have 2 state-of-the-art Yamaha sound consoles. Normally, they use one of those sound consoles at what we call front of house. That console is in charge of covering everything the audience hears. Then they use the other console backstage for monitors, and it covers everything the actors have to hear. But Chapman Celebrates is so large, we actually need both consoles at front of house. So the first year, this is a picture of the first year in 2017, we brought it up to front of house, and the majority of the show was on the console that kind of faced the stage. We had about 18 mics then that sat on the side. If you go to the next slide, this made things really awkward for the engineer because anytime he had to switch over to the other one, he's looking at the stage like this. And what a lot of people don't realize is that every time an actor says a line, it's a cue for the sound operator. There's never more microphones open than the people who are actually actively singing or speaking at the time. So every time someone speaks, he's opening up the mic, and then when their line ends, he closes the mic. So to sit like this, even just for a couple of numbers, became very awkward for him. So we learned a lot from that. The other thing that we did is, if you go to the next slide, we had only 30 microphones for the cast, but there were a lot more actors than that would sing or speak. So what we ended up having to do was swap mics. Fortunately, we had an amazing team backstage, a combination of professionals and students that could make those swaps. But what it meant is that the actor would dance this huge number, sing this huge number, then they'd have to run off stage and strip off part of that costume so that my technicians could get to the microphones and rip the microphones off that actor and then run them over to another actor and put them on in the quick changes. It became very complex. It was hard to keep track of. And we were very fortunate that we had a fantastic team who managed to stay on top of them. And not once did we have a performer go out without a microphone or with the wrong microphone. But it certainly added a lot of stress to the situation. So in 2018, the show got bigger exponentially. And we decided that it was going to be too complex to do this kind of swapping. So we moved up, instead of 30 mics, we went up to about 47 wireless mics. Plus we had mics on stands backstage so that anytime the cast was off stage, they could just go up to a microphone and sing. So we didn't have to worry about a cast member forgetting that they were supposed to offstage sing and go to the dressing room or run to the restroom, and then we turn on their wireless mic. So these offstage mics really allowed us to kind of fill out that ensemble and give us a really big sound without accidentally catching one of the 30 ensemble members in the wrong place. So if you want to switch to the next slide. So by expanding our microphones, also our orchestra expanded dramatically. What this meant was that now both of our consoles were full. So these two consoles together can hold a total of 136 inputs, and we were using 117 of them. So it was an enormous programming job for Kristin and myself to lay out in each number which microphones are actually singing in that number, and then program them out. Because again, Kristin doesn't have 47 fingers to control all of those microphones spread out across the whole console. So the nice thing about digital consoles is they have something called a DCA, which is like a sub-master. You can take all of the male ensemble, even if there's 10 of them, and mix them down to just one fader. So with one fader, you can turn everything on or off. But that's a lot of pre-programming. So it's a lot of working with Matt to make sure that we have the right voices in the right places on the right songs, that we've got the right ensemble members. And then of course, we've always got the offstage singers as well. We also, if you look, the big red stripes is when he knew that he had to actually switch over to the other console. One console controlled all of the vocals and the other one controlled all of the orchestra. So there were 3 numbers that he would have to switch over and be on the other console to mix before he came back to the main one. So this spreadsheet kind of helped us keep track of like literally where we are and where we're going. So if you want to switch to the next slide, this year, again, we put the consoles side by side. It was a lot easier for him to just step back and forth. He was always facing the stage. What this meant was that our poor video team, who's normally also up in this space, got crammed down to a tiny little square at front of house because we were suddenly taking up twice as much space as we normally were. If you want to go to the next slide. So 2018 was the year that Bob Weir performed for us. And it was an amazing experience to work with him. Frequently when I work with singers or performers that come from the rock and roll background or the pop background, the more concert settings, they're used to having in-ear monitors. They're used to having big wedges all over the stage. They're used to that. Conveniently, the Musco owns those wedges. So in preparation for Bob, I had a bunch of wedges set out on the stage, ready for him to go, ready to dial in so he could hear his own voice, he could hear his guitar, all of that. I was amazed. He walked out on stage, looked at the wedges and went, I don't need any of those, cut them. He's like, I just want to listen to the room. And it was really impressive to see someone who had such a developed ear and knew his music and his songs so well and knew how to play to a crowd and knew how to play to a room and didn't need all of that support under him. So I took a picture from backstage and was like, I think this is like the most amazing that he's just got this clear stage out in front of him. This is during sound check, so you can kind of see our road cases, but those were the road cases that we had used to wheel out all these big wedges, and we packed them up and wheeled them all off. So it was really just a pleasure to see that. So on to 2019, if you want to switch to the next slide. Our biggest yet, here's our consoles layouts. So again, just to give you a sense of the scale, we have both of these consoles packed to the gills. We have outputs going all over the place. We have inputs coming in from the orchestra pit. We have them coming in from the performers on stage. We have them, from video. We have them from QLab to play sound effects. We have, stuff moving everywhere, parts everywhere. Again, I was so grateful for the support from the staff at the Musco, because they made everything go so smoothly that, having done it twice before, they were ready for the chaos that I bring in. They had the space cleared out for us, ready for us to just kind of roll in. If you want to switch to the next slide. Again, this is the sound check for Vanessa Williams, and it was amazing because she actually brought in her tour engineer, Don Holder. So it was amazing to work with someone who had been working for a performer for a decade and knew her voice and knew what she wanted and knew exactly the kind of settings that needed to be set up. It made everything run so smoothly. He could come in, set everything up, get it balanced, and then she just had to come onto the stage and be comfortable and know that where she was. So it was such a pleasure to work again with these incredible professionals that came in to work with us. And then if you want to go to the last slide, the other really nice thing about this year is we finally had a student who was really excited about sound. And so she found herself at the console every night. And Kristin was really excited to have someone there who wanted to learn. And so during rehearsals, he would hand over the console to her and let her mix some of the more simple numbers, some of the smaller cast sizes, just so she could really get her hands on the console. She was also there for load in and did all the programming on one of the consoles. So it was really great to kind of bring the students in and let them get their hands on the gear and try it out. Mm-hmm. So any Wonderful. Questions? I talked really fast.
Cool. Thank you, Cricket. No, it's great. So much to talk through. And because all these three design areas are so different in terms of the process and also the product, it's good to see, what goes into those early stages of how do you plan it out. In your case, it's spreadsheets and how do we make the equipment work for the show that we need to put on. Which is very different than the other two areas. So it's really an interesting way to look at the design process.
The pictures aren't as fun, though.
We're going to move into a discussion. The pictures are different. They're different. I get excited about a good console. So I guess it just depends on who's talking. But I know you do too, Cricket. So we're going to go into the collaboration part. We probably have time for just one question, and then we'll turn it over to Napoleon for questions from the audience, but the viewers. I think my most burning question is really about, does your process change depending on who your collaborators are? Because we all, a sound designer rarely collaborates with other sound designers. A lighting designer rarely collaborates with other lighting designers because there's usually only one of them. Same thing for a director. And so we go in and we have these little families. We assemble our team and we have this new family of people that have never sometimes worked together and other times they have. So I don't know if anybody feels like they can just dive in, a quick response on if your process changes at all or not at all.
I mean, absolutely it changes depending on who I'm working with. And, what's delightful, working
How
with,
so?
Well, working with costumes, and wigs that dramatically affect where mics are placed and who can wear them and how quickly quick changes can happen. So it's really important for me to work with costume designers to say, we're going to have a pack here. Like if there's a slinky dress, do we want it higher? Do we want to hide it on the thigh? Do we want, something else? Or
that
wigs.
Is something we do. We put mic packs on thighs.
Yep. Or the number of times performers, I've got a headset mic and the performers come out with big dangly earrings. And then I go to costumes and say, all we hear on the mic is click, 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 click. Yeah. But also working with, when it comes to sound cues, working with lighting designers. I'm frequently working with scenic designers about like, where can I hide a speaker? I need to make the sound like it's coming from over here, or I need a monitor so the singers over here can hear, like, where can I hide something? So.
Kristin, Carin, do either of you have anything to add to that? Cool. Go for it.
Yeah, I will. I think I'll respond to that idea of if it's a team you've worked with before, it's going to be a lot different than a team that's new to you. And for anyone not in theater, I think the closest metaphor to that would be like going on a first date and then expecting to work with someone for 2 months on a big project, right?
Yes.
That's kind of what it's like. So there's definitely that. It's a different conversation talking about a show with a director that you're working with for the first time versus a director you've already kind of been through the weeds with. And 9 to 5 is a good example. It's a weird example because, and maybe it's just because I'm getting more established in my career out here in California, but almost everyone on that team I've worked with before and multiple times. The costume designer, Rachel, is my closest friend in the world. So those conversations were very casual. And we just, there was multiple times, at least one I remember, where I invited everyone to my tiny little apartment in Garden Grove, and we sat around my table and we went through the whole script together. And it was because we knew it was a hang session, and it was an opportunity for us to just embrace the show and the musical in a fun way. And I would have never necessarily done that with a director I was working with for the first time.
Certainly the shorthand is helpful, especially on big projects. If you have an existing process that you can rely on. Carin, what about you?
Oh, I was just going to say my biggest collaboration, the most important collaboration for me really is lighting, because you saw all those colors of all those costumes on stage, and different color light can make those colors different, those costumes different colors, right? So if we need something to be really bright and vibrant, I need to be working hand in hand with the lighting designer, and we need to be on the same page as far as color palette. I talked about that a little bit with the disco and the fever and all of that stuff. We're telling the same story, and it can go really, really well, or it can go really bad. I mean, I've had situations where the communication isn't as good as it should be with a lighting designer, and maybe we don't ever sit in the same room and talk. Maybe we've had a couple of phone conversations, or everyone's out of town and everyone's just coming in at the last minute and doing their thing. And a beautiful red dress on stage can either be a beautiful vibrant red dress, or it can be green, or it could be brown, or it could be depending on what light it is, right? You've got a red dress, and if you hit it with green light, which is its complementary color, you get, excuse my language, poop brown. I don't think poop's that bad of a word. Anyway, I was going to say something else, but I figured,
when I think about these 3 areas and the ways that you all work together, Carin mentioned that she feels a real synergy with the lights and need to collaborate deeply with the lights on color. Rick Cricket mentioned the room, that Bob Weir had mentioned, oh no, get rid of those, I don't need those for the room. Cricket is in many ways collaborating with the room because she's designing to be heard. And Musco Center is known for its acoustics and the way that it's so perfect for the sound. So I don't know if either of you want to talk a little bit about, is there a specific other area of design that you feel you integrate more deeply with, or is it all kind of balanced for you?
Well, I can say that the room is important for me too. So for a completely different reason than Cricket, if I'm designing costumes for a small space, a little black box theater, something very intimate, I will design with a lot of detail, right? If I'm designing for the Musco and I have people that are sitting 100 feet away from the stage, right? I have to design big, right? Big, huge swaths of color. I'm not going to worry about little tiny pearl earring, right? I'm going to worry about big colors and how they blend on stage, the big picture. So that's also very important to probably Kristin as well, the size of the house and the size of the stage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily need to have a historically accurate 1970s doorknob if the closest person is 100 feet away. I would say it's tough because, yeah, I think for the most part, I rely on the lighting designer because what scenic design does is create the world. And if we can't see it, or if it's lit in a way that flattens all of the paint treatments and it makes them not look good, then I'm kind of at the mercy of the lighting designer a little bit in that way. But I do think this is just what we do, but we're creating a composition together. And so we all need to consider, even though I don't necessarily deal with the actors directly, other than making sure they feel safe on my set, I'm definitely thinking about their proportions in relationship to the architecture I'm putting around them. So a good example was a murder mystery I did a while back where we had one of the suspects I think he was like 6'6" tall. And so all of a sudden my usual like 7-foot doorways don't quite feel proportionally the right size because the poor man is like, if he puts a hat on, we're stuck. So definitely have to consider those things as well.
Yeah. And I noticed from your 9 to 5 design, the portals were actually a way of scaling down the stage to make so that the actors don't get lost. It helped us know where to look. And so this idea of scale seems to, and the room that you're in really seems to impact all 3 of these areas. Super interesting, you guys. I could talk to you all night, but we're gonna pass it back to Napoleon so that we can get some questions from our viewers. And so, Napoleon, it's heading back to you, sir.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be joining you all this evening.
Welcome.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi.
So to be conscious of time, we have a few great questions, and I'm going to try to keep it brief, but they're kind of meaty, so we'll just dive right in, shall we?
Great.
This first question is for Kristin and Carin. What happens to the costumes and set pieces after a production? Is anything preserved for historical record or for your archives or anything of the sort?
Who wants to go first?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have to give you a little bit of background on where we get the costumes from first. So there's a number of places that we can get costumes from for any production. Chapman has a wonderful stock of costumes that we pull from. So if we pull from there, obviously we get them all cleaned and we put them back there. They're all inventoried and they're put back, from whence they came. Things that are purchased go into that stock as well because they were purchased with Chapman money, and so they go back into the Chapman warehouse. Then there are things that I pull from my own personal warehouse. I have a warehouse of about 100,000 costumes that I rent out to a lot of the productions that I work on. So if those are my costumes, then I take them back and restock them. And then things that are built from scratch, which usually is anywhere from 10 to 50% of a show. We figure out who kind of needs it best. So whoever paid for it obviously gets to own it if they want it. But there's a lot of times that I'm working in a professional theater situation, theater up in LA, or a theater that doesn't have a costume shop, doesn't have a costume stock room, and they don't have anywhere to keep it. So sometimes what I will do is I will negotiate into my contract when I'm starting something and I'm building from scratch. I'll say, okay, I will build these 5 Renaissance dresses, but then part of my contract is that I get to keep them at the end of the show.
And Kristin, I'm sure you kept all of the 9 to 5 set and it's in your garage.
Yeah, I'm using that portal for a headboard. No, yeah, definitely. I certainly don't have a stock of furniture that I bring in. There are moments where there's something I really want and I can't possibly ask the people I'm working for to spend $40 on a doorknob. But that's my thing, right? So sometimes I'll be like, well, this is my doorknob now, and we're just gonna put it in this show. But for the most part, we're talking about bigger stuff. And with scenery, I I personally, I just feel so wasteful sometimes when it's like you do this beautiful thing and then you know it's just going to end up in the dumpster afterwards. So I do my best to try and consider that when I'm designing, and use things that are the building blocks of a set. So trying not to get too technical with vocabulary, like platforms or the standard sized things. Think about like adult mature Legos, I guess. And then with walls that are certain sizes that we can reuse in a different set. And there's some custom things that just really aren't going to survive. In terms of 9 to 5, we did build those portals in a way that it was meant to be kept and used later. And so that's a shout out to the College of Performing Arts production team, Josh Calderon and Mark Emil. They made sure it was built in a way that it would be able to be kept and used in the future. And actually, I know the scenic designer for the Magic Flute for the Musco was going to use those and adapt them to her aesthetic for that show. So that's always nice to hear. Frankly, it's like, oh, good, it will be used again. I do like hearing that. And I know there was a kitchen unit we kept because it has a beautiful like sink to it, and we think we might be able to reuse that show. But other than that, for the most part, things were just deconstructed and put away in storage, and hopefully those building blocks will come back into the next show.
Very nice. Next question. It's for everyone, and I'll call on you each individually. How do you think COVID-19 will affect each of your areas of design in the near and distant future? And let's start with Cricket, because you have a big old smile there.
Well, I mean, in the near future, there isn't any live theater. It's simply not safe to put 200 people in the room for 3 hours right now. It's just not. So, in the short term, a lot has changed. I have started seeing videos of theaters that are trying to put face shields on their performers. I can tell you from a microphone perspective, that's a disaster, because the microphone will not only hear the voice, but it'll hear the reflection off the plastic. So everyone's going to sound echoey and terrifying. But I think, long term, it's just about keeping things sanitary, keeping things clean, and finding ways to make, kind of more space around things. The area backstage where the microphones are kept is often kind of crammed into a corner, and then the actors all gather around in a massive group to put on their mics. And so a lot of the things we're talking about is having actual scheduled, this actor comes at 7:05, this actor comes at 7:10, this actor, so that we don't get those big kind of crowded areas, and we have time to put gloves on or wipe things down or whatever we need to do depending on where we are when the world opens back up again. So
very cool. Kristin?
Yeah, that's a big question, because I don't know what scenic design is going to do. It's something there, realistically speaking, I'm just like, well, as we slowly start opening up, one of the last things I think to return will be a set, because I see like this projection, like first we're not going to be inside, we're going to do outdoor performances where we're not worried about the HVAC system. And if we're doing that, maybe we don't need scenery because you've got this lovely world around you already, or maybe it's minimized because we're not filling a stage. So I'm not sure. I will say personally, I'm pivoting a lot more towards the projections design end and the video editing and the animation stuff, because that is absolutely blowing up right now in terms of all these Zoom shows or recorded shows, or we're kind of in I'm excited. I think it's the Wild West world of theater, and we're all just being encouraged to be creative and come up with new ways to tell stories. And I'm just going to be excited about it, because the alternative is being frustrated that I don't have the career I had 3 months ago. So let's just go for it and see what
Absolutely.
happens.
Love that positivity.
Absolutely. Carin, what about you?
So costumes is a lot different because we touch bodies. We get really close to people. So obviously all of my shows have been canceled for the whole summer, but I do teach at a university theater department, and we've decided to do a show that's going to be live streamed. We didn't realize this when we chose the show last year, but it only has 4 actors. And the director is doing it in such a way that those actors never have to be closer than 6 feet. So, and it just turned out that the script really lent itself well to having sort of 4 vignettes on stage and them all being lit separately. They don't have to really come together and touch each other. As far as what we're doing for costume is, I'm having Zoom meetings with actors. I'm having them check their own clothes to give me sizes because I can't physically measure them. They're going to tell me their sizes. I'm buying multiples. We're doing 4 live streaming performances, and they have a different costume for each live streaming performance because we can't do laundry. We can't have a costume crew person that comes and takes sweaty clothes and touches them and does the laundry. That's just not sanitary. So each actor has 1 costume, and we have 4 versions of that costume, and they're just going to wear a new dress every night.
Wow. Matt, any considerations that you're looking at as a director and other areas of your field?
Yeah, I think, certainly picking the projects that you're working on that take into account distances of bodies, relationships, and is there any kissing? Is there any things that is required by the script that makes now not the time to do that play? I think that's a big consideration. I certainly think there's an excitement about how do we creatively attack this problem, because that's what you do in the theater. You figure it out together, and you hold on, and here we go. And as we do that, I think what's great is that the priority on safety, both for the performers and the audience, and kind of, stepping into it gradually, so we don't, directing something right now, I would take into spaces between bodies and cleanliness and things, which I wouldn't have done before as much. I certainly wouldn't have thought about, like who's picking up the laundry, but that's now a consideration, and so it certainly expands the scope of my role, because I feel like safety is part of my role. And so this adds a whole different chapter of that.
Wonderful. We have our one last question that I would love each of you to answer. It's kind of a fun one. We're all spending a lot more time at home. We're working from home. We're staring at our empty walls. We're, setting up Zoom things where there's weird things in the background. Do each of you have any advice of how to incorporate design principles into our everyday lives at home?
Ooh.
Kristin?
Okay. No, go.
Carin, yeah. Carin, since you're on it, let's go.
I had a thought. I figured I'd just share.
Yeah, great.
Well, and I talk to my costume design students about this all the time. So we are all costume designers, right? So you get up and you get dressed every morning and you become a character, right? So am I going to school today? Am I going to church today? Am I going to a nightclub? Am I going to see my mom, or am I going to see my boyfriend? You're going to dress differently for all of those occasions, aren't you? So every day we're telling a different story, and every day we're a different character. So you're going to do this now. Every day that you get up and you put on your clothes, you're going to think, how conservative am I going to look today? How artsy am I going to look today? How sexy am I going to look today? How not sexy should I look today, right? And those are things that we do every time we plan on what we're wearing every day, but it just is natural to us. Well, that's what a costume designer does with every single character on stage. So that is something that you already do in your everyday life. You are designing your character every morning you get dressed.
I love that, Carin. One of my favorite quotes from RuPaul, "We're all born naked and the rest is drag." It's always a fun one. Kristin.
I think that's I'm going to try and speak as the scenic designer. And I guess I would say, channel your inner Marie Kondo and figure out what sparks joy around you. And if you haven't watched, please check out her Netflix series. But I think to some extent also, it's really important that we forgive ourselves a little bit and cut ourselves some slack. Like if your desk is a little messy, maybe that's okay. Maybe you're just fine with a messy desk, and we never asked to be stuck in our apartments and have these work/living environments. And so maybe that's my advice to the world, is just cut yourself some slack, try and find joy in your own environment. And whatever that means for you, go for it. Yeah.
Any sound recommendations for at-home viewing, listening, all of the above?
Well, so what I would actually say, as a sound designer, so much of my job is setting environment. Where are these characters? What time of day it is? And because as humans, we are much more visually orientated than we are to our ears, I tell all budding sound designers, and I think it's a great thing for like everybody to kind of have that experience, is take a moment and find an environment that you're comfortable in and turn off all the stuff around you. Turn off the TV, turn off the stereo, turn off everything, and sit down and close your eyes and keep your eyes closed for 5 whole minutes. And you're going to start hearing things you have never heard before, because your brain right now, if it hears a sound and it's steady and it's consistent and it's not causing you any danger, your brain literally ignores it, just tunes it out. And so by closing your eyes and removing that visual element, it forces your brain to pay attention to the signals it's getting from the ears. And so, you know, if you're sitting in a park that you've sat in 1,000 times before, playing with friends, you know, hanging out with friends, playing with your dog, whatever, if you actually take a moment to take the earbuds out and sit on the top of that park bench and just close your eyes, you're going to notice so much more about that environment that you've never noticed before. You're going to hear things that have always been there and you've never noticed. So I would say take a moment in kind of the like chaos of being locked in your house and the craziness of everything going on. Take a moment to actually unplug and close your eyes and listen to your world, because it's going to surprise you.
I absolutely love that advice. I'm going to do that after this, and I hope other people do it also. That is our time for the night. Thank you all so much. Cricket, Carin, Kristin, and Matt, we appreciate you so much. And thank you for sharing all of your insights and your experiences. You really have inspired me and everyone watching.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for everyone out there at home, let us know what your experiences of tonight's conversation was in the chat. We love your input and your feedback. And if you want to show us some additional support, the Musco Center Creative Fund makes At the Musco online programs like this possible, while also supporting to fund the presentation of world-class artists, ensembles, and speakers on our stage. Please consider donating today at muscocenter.org. On behalf of the College of Performing Arts, Musco Center for the Arts, and Chapman University, thank you for joining us at the Musco. We hope to see you soon. Have a great night, and thank you for joining us for CoPA Designs for the Musco stage. Good night, everyone.